Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I am your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is an inventor and tech entrepreneur in California. He is the creator of Entangled, a mobile app based on the Global Consciousness Project that explores mass consciousness effects and the new technological possibilities of mind-matter interaction. Previously, he was an intern at Princeton's PEAR lab, a foundational consciousness research lab. In addition to Entangled, he is also the co-founder of Bionatis. Crap, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce that. What is it?
That works. Bionatis.
Bionatis. Yeah, okay, cool. Shoot. All right, let me finish this up. A unique R&D and investment company focused developing breakthrough scientific discoveries into successful end-stage businesses. Welcome to the show, the man, Adam Curry. What's up, brother?
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, brother. It's good to see you again. We were talking a little bit before we met. We met briefly at the Collective Evolution party, and you did a talk. I had to come up to you because it was definitely mind-blowing, super next level. I love everything that you're working on. And then I meet your friend and also collaborator, business partner in Egypt. So, it's a small world.
It is a small world, yeah. This year has been a really good year for me to meet high-quality people, from Joe at Collective Evolution and Ruby to yourself and lots of other people. And as the year is going on, it's one of those years where you realize that the world is very, very small. Everybody is kind of getting to know everybody else.
Yeah, man, and that's a little bit of I guess what Entangled is showing. You're working on a lot of really interesting stuff, and when I watch you speak, it was very short, and I'm sure you could have went on for hours with the research that you've done, what you're working on, all very fascinating stuff. Do you want to give the audience a little brief history on your background, how you got to where you are today, and then let's launch into some of this incredible stuff that you're working on?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Somebody asked me this question a couple days ago when I was doing a talk, and I remember two stories in it that I think were actually influential about how I kind of ended up doing what I'm doing, sort of building technology and businesses around mad science. I grew up in Colorado Springs, and about 100 years before, Nicola Tesla had moved to Colorado Springs and created a lab there where he was exploring a lot of his more futuristic energy stuff, which later became the power infrastructure, in the world in Colorado Springs. And he moved there because the rarefied atmosphere is really good for exploring how energy is sent back and forth. And I was always tinkering and asking for my mom to bring home devices and things that I could take apart. And she heard about this Tesla museum. And so she brought me there, and the museum was just like kind of a dilapidated warehouse where they actually had a bunch of Tesla's original devices, like the things that he had built. And no one was ever there except this one guy who ran the place, is this nonprofit. And so a couple times he would take me there and so drop me off, and the guy would let me actually play with Tesla's devices that he had built himself. And so that kind of started my fascination with Nikola Tesla and sort of building electronics in general. When you start to read Tesla's works, you realize that the alternating current and many of the other things that he was working on was really only the beginning. And he had a kind of vision for a technological future that we never achieved, unfortunately. We got some of it, but we didn't get all of it. When I was 15 or 16, I went to a bookstore, and I was walking along the aisle, and there was this book that was kind of outside of it was taken off and had been put back in the pile. And I opened it up, and I was reading about this thing called the PEAR lab, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. It's this group at Princeton that's doing this mind-matter interaction research at the quantum level. Oh, very cool. So a couple days later, I went to a movie, and my friend's dad ended up driving us home, and he started talking about this laboratory at Princeton where they're doing these stuff. I said, "Oh, that's very funny. I just read about that a few days ago." And he said, "Well, I'm actually going to a science conference at the end of the month at which the laboratory manager and the founder will be speaking. Would you like to go?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So I went to this meeting, and the first people I met were Bob and Brenda. Bob John, who is the dean of Princeton, who founded the laboratory, and Brenda, the lab manager. And we started talking, I think, about Nikola Tesla and about some of the more exotic ideas that he had about kind of decentralizing the power grid and electrifying the world and all of these things. And I felt like kind of through synchronicities, I had landed at this place where like real scientists, right, who are at the top of their game, were talking about what could have been, right, with Nikola Tesla. And that's sort of how I got started. So at the PEAR Lab, I became an intern. Like this is like 2001 to 2003. The PEAR Lab was a consciousness research laboratory founded by the dean of the engineering school. It existed on the campus from 1980 to like 2007. And Bob, the dean, had become very interested in this question of what is the mind, right? Is it just an illusion of the brain, or is it something more, right? Obviously, the brain is involved, but there's this big mystery that academic types are admitting to now, which is that we can't really explain what consciousness is without somehow invoking consciousness. So is it actually more of a fundamental thing in the universe, or is it it's just sort of this ephemeral illusion, an emergent process of material things happening in the brain? So he set up this experiment to try to get to the bottom of whether or not our minds might be something more than an illusion. And so it became very well known for this experiment using random number generators. And basically, you could think of this random number generator as a device that is looking at intrinsically random physical phenomena. So the behavior, for example, of electrons or photons in a quantum state. And you can't really predict the outcome of how these particles are going to behave based on what came before it. So it's intrinsically random. And so if you have this device that can measure these quantum processes happening, you can represent them as ones or zeros on a computer output, and it becomes very easy to do statistical tests. So this random number generator outputs an even number of ones and zeros. All is well with the universe, right? Until you get somebody to attempt to affect the device. Ask them to attempt to move the thing up with their intention or their mind, and producing more ones or more zeros, and it outputs more ones or more zeros in general in a way that's statistically significant, right? So that was the PEAR Lab. And the PEAR Lab spun off the Global Consciousness Project in some ways. They were related. And PEAR Lab really captured the world's imagination and attention when it came to big questions about the nature of our minds and reality and who and what we are. And when it closed down in 2007, some friends and I got together and we made cheap, portable random number generators for the research community to carry on the work. And we explored all kinds of different applications that random number generator stuff might go into, like consumer devices. And then in 2012, I went to San Francisco and did the tech entrepreneur thing and started thinking about how I can kind of bridge the world that I had just come from, which is the world of consciousness research and electrons and circuits and Tesla, with the current world, which is what's going on in Silicon Valley with apps and startups and all that kind of thing, because I felt that the two really kind of belong together and they would inevitably converge. So that's what's happening. Beyond just myself and Entangled, but my project Entangled is really trying to bring that PEAR Lab global consciousness history into kind of the modern world in computers and mobile apps and that kind of thing. That's how I got here.
Wow, brother, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had continued that work. That's really fascinating, because I had Oh shoot, now I'm blanking on his name. Who's the Global Consciousness Project? You
Roger
know this.
Nelson. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Roger was on, and we spoke about that. And I had heard about the random number generators at Burning Man maybe 3-4 years ago, and about how the numbers went less random when the man burns. So it's really fascinating data on global consciousness. And is there anything similar to that, doing it on such a wide scale? Any technology doing it as widely as that? And when the app comes out, is that going to be the widest scale, most advanced technology kind of monitoring and seeing what effect mass consciousness has?
Yeah, I think when the app comes out, it's definitely going to be the largest. I don't know if it's going to be the most sophisticated, because there's other ways that you can produce, true random noise that are more sophisticated than the way that we're doing it. Yeah, this might be helpful to explain what the Global Consciousness Project is. So Roger Nelson, who also worked at the PEAR Lab, had the idea, probably over a couple of beers, that it would be cool to spread these random number generators, multiple of them around the world, and to see if and how they behave similar or dissimilar when there are events that happen in the world that kind of like affect us all, right? So earthquakes, terrorist attacks, 9/11 is the famous example. So in the case of 9/11, what they saw was that these, I think at that time, probably 60 or 70 random number generators started to co-vary, right? So the data that they were outputting became less random across the whole network a couple of hours before the first plane struck, and then it kind of does this huge spike. It's like nothing they've ever seen before or since, and that fit the criteria of the experiment, which was that they were going to look at sort of predefined events that happen in the world, and if they fit this sort of criteria, then we're going to go back into the data and see if within that time frame and there was a huge statistically unlikely spike, and if so, it might kind of point at I guess global consciousness. The theory is that human consciousness or collective consciousness is somehow affecting the randomness of the fabric of reality to make it slightly less random in ways that are somehow meaningful to us. Right? So that's kind of the theory or the thesis going in, and 9/11 is probably the best example. So the Global Consciousness Project has been around for, I guess, like 20 years now, I believe. The work at Burning Man was done by IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, with Dean Radin, who also was formerly part of the PEAR Lab, and Lauren Carpenter, who in a previous life was the co-founder of Pixar. And so they got together and Lauren created a new kind of random number generator that's really robust. It's quite an impressive machine, and spread these around the area in which Burning Man takes place, and found results, I believe, very similar to what the GCP had found. Entangled, I think that we're gonna find a lot of the same stuff that the GCP and the IONS have found with Entangled, but because of the platform that we're using, because of giving everyone and tons of people a mobile app that essentially converts your phone into a random number generator, you can ask different types of questions, and you can ask sort of more probing questions than we've been able to do in the previous instantiations of consciousness research. And I'll give you an example. If you are the GCP and you've just got 70 RNGs sort of spread around the world, first of all, you're limited in the amount of data that you have, but you're also limited in the granularity of things like geography. Does geography matter? Your proximity to an event? And also meaningfulness, which is this subjective thing that it's very difficult to pull out of the data unless you have an app that can somehow look at what might be meaningful to a population. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that there is an earthquake in India. Okay. And it's a big earthquake. And we have, let's say, a couple of million people using the app. Well, we kind of know something about the location of those people, so we'll be able to see if there are effects that exist, that the effects, for example, are more stronger or have some sort of properties that change as you get closer to the epicenter of the earthquake. So if you're closer to an event, does it impact you more in a way that's going to affect the fabric of reality, hypothetically? But also, let's say that we do an experiment, and in part of these experiments, we indicate your nationality. And so there's a number of people who indicate that they come from India, but they're nowhere near India when the earthquake happens. They're in America, they're in Europe, but the earthquake happens. Can we then we could hypothetically then parse out their data and see if there's a stronger effect among those people. And that would tell us something a lot more interesting than whether or not geography matters. That would kind of answer this question about, do time and space really matter as much in these effects, or is it more about how is it personally impactful to the people who are involved? The idea being that if you're Indian, the earthquake in India is going to mean something more to you than if you're not, for example. So it is the largest, but I don't think that the size really matters so much as much as the ability to kind of push ahead with asking new types of questions about global consciousness. There's this other side of Entangled too, which is the technology side, right? So now you're talking about the ability to put these sensitive physical devices into computers, into our smartphones, more or less for free. And if some part of our mind is affecting the device, does that mean that we can, in some kind of meaningful or interesting new way, connect the human mind to computers, like in a non-invasive way? So think of mobile games where now your only input is your thumbs tapping the screen. Perhaps there could be some sort of feedback in the game that is based on the emotional resonance, or in other words, the influence on the random number generator by whatever mechanism it happens to work. Very, very interesting new potentials and horizons and technological possibilities that we're starting to unpack with Entangled.
Wow, man, that's super fascinating. My mind is kind of going all over the place with it. So, the baseline thing that I've heard, have you ever read or heard about the Celestine prophecy?
I've read it. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, so the premise of that is basically more or less when enough of our minds come into this harmonious state that we're gonna switch the mass consciousness and move into a new paradigm. And when I look at, I'm reading the Life and Teachings of the Masters of Far East. Been mentioning a lot, 6 books, so it takes a while. That and the really high level spiritual stuff that I resonate with, that is either ancient or just is so on point. It will commonly refer to the global consciousness in some sort of way. It'll say, you're all connected, we are all connected. Now we're proving it scientifically. And one of the things that I personally believe, and I think that the data is starting to show this, that when enough of us can get into a harmonious state, really emanate and feel peace, really, when you're talking about, it's not so much the location, but the feeling. So if we're putting out this energy to the field that is peaceful and is harmonious, when we have enough people doing that, it's just going to shift. And maybe it's going to be technology and data like yours that will show, saying, hey guys, like, we have real data on this. And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it because he is helping more people cure themselves of terminal illnesses through simple meditation, just meditating. That's all. But he's collecting the data and the science. And he just says, the more that your mind can wrap around why it works, the more impact it's going to have, because you believe it more, you understand it more. And so it's going to become more effective. Is that kind of thought something that you resonate with, what you've seen in studying consciousness and then adding the technological piece to it?
Yes and no. So with Entangled, my goal is not to convince anyone of a particular point of view about consciousness or about changing the world through coming together or about us being all connected. But it's really to kind of probe deeper into what those could mean, and to introduce in a very easy, fun way the tip of the iceberg of what we're talking about, which is maybe consciousness has some sort of influence on the world around us. Maybe there's a little bit more to the story than the sort of rote materialism that we've been told is the truth, and that's kind of on its way out. And if I can do that, I'd be satisfied. As far as taking things further, I really think that it's really not. If Entangled can become a platform to allow people to take these empirical results and use it to inform like the things that they're personally interested in, that would be great. Because it's too much for one person or one group to really like be the driving force behind some sort of new paradigm change in multiple different paradigms, right? When it comes to other things that are like popular in the world right now, like you create your own reality and that kind of thing, I think that's a slippery slope. While personally I do believe that like some of that is definitely true because I've seen it work in my own life, I think like invoking consciousness research or quantum mechanics or whatever it is to say, oh, you create your own reality is like kind of, it's slippery, and we have to be really careful about like what kind of statements we make in that case. Tell you create your own reality to somebody with chronic pain, right? It's not something that they want to hear, and they're really not like sort of implicit or guilty. They don't feel like they're implicit or guilty in their chronic pain. And I don't necessarily know how best to navigate the new kind of like ethical questions that this stuff raises. The technology side, I think I'm equipped to navigate, but certain of the sort of more philosophical implications that can be drawn between the fundamental empirical consciousness research, mind, matter, and action stuff, and things that are very sensitive and personal to a large number of people. That's best done by others, and it's good that we're answering these questions. But the point is that it's not one kid or one group that's really going to have the answers for those things. But I think by kind of introducing a new perspective, kind of a updated materialist perspective or a pro consciousness first perspective, we can probably have a better and more informed conversation about those things. So that's kind of my yes and no political answer to your question.
Yeah, very diplomatic. I like it. Yeah. Well, you're working, the implications of it are massive. And when you start getting that data and we can probe deeper onto what consciousness is, because that in itself is just extremely fascinating. And was it you that set up that machine at Collective Evolution where you would go in and there would be that ball, and then you would think about a color, and then the ball would change to that color, or at least it did for me. And I was trying to figure out how the flying F that worked. I was like, how does it pick that color? So I went back out and I was like, okay, maybe it's like seeded me to think blue, right? And so I went back out and I tried it again, and I thought about a different color, and it worked again. So what the heck? So for me, if we're talking about how our consciousness shapes a reality, I think that part of it is going to be the hands you're dealt. Part of it is this surrender to, your environment and random stuff that can happen and all that kind of stuff. But I'm a believer personally in that once something happens, we do have the opportunity to create a reality. So if me and you get in a car accident and we're both mangled, one of us can choose to see how we can grow from this opportunity, and one of us can hold on to why this accident has changed our lives and we become alcoholics and we never heal from it. And that's a choice from our own consciousness, in the sense of we're going to now shape our reality from how we view it. So I kind of see the both side of the scale there, because we're probably not going to be deliberately asking to get smoked by a bus or something. But maybe you want to share a little bit on either how that technology worked with, the machine getting into my mind and choosing the color, or me shooting a thought and then the color happening, or going into some of these fantastic other projects that you have going on at Bionatus, because all of them are really fascinating, and you're sharing that you're using some unique scientific either algorithms or research to create them. I don't know, maybe you can help me wrap my mind around it.
Yeah. Okay. So you tried the light at Collective
Yeah.
Evolution. Yeah, the light's cool. I'm talking in abstract terms about random number generators and whatever, but I actually think the technology side is really where the fun stuff is. So the the light's actually very simple. Inside is a random number generator, and when it behaves less randomly, it will trigger the light to turn one of 8 possible colors. Right. So the idea is that your conscious mind has no idea how to shift the bits in a random number generator. Like, we don't know, right? But there's some part of our consciousness that the theory goes that is connected to the fabric of physical reality, and therefore, if you have this feedback loop between the colors of the light, your conscious observation, then it's kind of like the observer effect, right? That's like looking at the behavior of waves or particles, and depending on how you measure or how you choose to observe it, you collapse that wave function in like one way or the other. Well, just put some sort of content in between that collapse, right? So you are receiving the content, whether that's like a color change or whether that's something else, which in turn influences the collapse of that probabilistic measurement in one way or the other. Make sense? So I think part of the consciousness technology with you asked how it works, and this is how it works.
Yeah.
So,
No. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, meh. Interesting.
Yeah. So previously, like the collapse of the wave function is like you have a probabilistic system and then an outcome that could be here or here, and then you observe this, and it causes it to be this or this, right? If you take that interpretation of quantum mechanics. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, well, we have this probabilistic system, and it could produce this outcome or it could produce that outcome. But let's say we're not going to show this outcome directly to the human, but we're going to, if it's this outcome, then we're going to provide this type of feedback to the human. And then when they're going to observe the feedback, and that's going to collapse the system into providing that feedback. It's a bit of a time distortion thing, I guess. But that's basically the idea, is you want to put some sort of human feedback in the probabilistic to deterministic exchange. So the random number generator controls the light, what it's going to become. And
yeah, that's fascinating. You're taking like 3 things that I'm aware of. You're taking Schrodinger's cat, you're taking the quantum split experiment, and then when I was in Egypt with Nassim Haramein, it talked about how long it would take if a blind person to have a Rubik's cube to solve, and the chances of him solving it are just ridiculously absurd. Not going to happen. But if you gave just one piece of feedback, which was yes or no, getting closer or further away, then he would solve it. For almost never ever solve it, to actually solve it within a short time. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up. I was actually just thinking about that a couple days ago. So well, let's say bracket the mind lamp thing, but if the process that you're seeing with a mind lamp, where there's some part of you that's affecting the system to give you some feedback or bring you some result or effect or whatever. So if that's true, which the research shows abundantly that it's true, then we can maybe start to understand some of the mysteries of evolution, of how life came to be on this planet or any planet, right? There's this, it's been kind of debunked, but like the creationists in arguments with the Darwinists, to characterize it that way, will claim that the odds of life developing just by chance is X 100 gazillion to 1 because of all these things would have to line up. And while that has been sort of debunked, it's still very true that the odds of life coming together is pretty unlikely, but then given enough time, then maybe it happens. Well, that could be, or that could be just like the Rubik's Cube, where it's absurdly unlikely that somebody with their eyes folded or a blind person is ever going to get it by chance. But if they have one piece of feedback, then it can sort of come together much more quickly and much more easily. Well, what if let's say you somehow start with consciousness, right? But you have a very proto-consciousness, like a single-celled organism or a multi-celled organism. And how does it get from here to here, which is a more complex, evolved creature? Well, it could be through just like random mass genetic changes and so forth. Or maybe there's something about consciousness and the fabric of physical reality that makes things like synchronicities or like lucky coincidences happen more often or in a more meaningful way to that consciousness that can facilitate its own evolution, right? So the things that it needs to grow, or the things that are coincidental for it to grow and develop, end up sort of coming to it in a way that exceeds the likelihood by any like statistical measure. But it's actually the fingerprints of consciousness that is involved in that process. So you could end up with you end up kind of resolving this issue of natural selection by properly understanding the role of consciousness in the physical world. Nassim has a much more elegant way of putting it called resonance. But I think we're speaking the same language there.
Yeah, man. Yep. Totally with you. It's really fascinating stuff. For me, I just went through the Resonance Science Foundation. I'm almost done that whole thing. And just the way that my mind is thinking now is different. I'm kind of just seeing things a little bit different, a little bit more scientific, kind of mathematical. You're like, oh, okay, interesting, and adding a little bit more depth and another view to see reality. So it's really fascinating to dive deep into this and how we extract data. And data is literally the information we need, and it's the feedback. It's just the information that we get from certain tests, the scientific method, and where we can take that. So I think that where we're taking it to is exciting places, and you're one of those people doing it with technologies and because Entangled isn't the only thing you're working on. You have 6 really interesting projects that I'm aware of. Luminas, I'm curious about because it does have athletic implications, and I'm always looking for peak performance and things like that. Of all your projects or the overarching scientific method that you're using, what excites you most? Like, what do you want to share about any of that?
Okay, well, I'll tell you a story about one, and then let's talk about Luminas because you've tried it, right?
I didn't get to try it. Unfortunately,
you didn't get to try it. Oh,
no, I didn't try it.
Sorry.
I know. Yeah, I want to. I want to try it.
Okay, so we've been talking about kind of like building technology based on invoking principles of science that are still forming, right? Or maybe in the recent past have been controversial. And anytime that you want to build a business or solve some problem, you really don't want to get into a competitive area where there's there's a whole bunch of people that are trying to do the same thing. Because even if you're successful, all your profits are going to get competed away, and it's not fun, right? But if you're trying to solve a problem and you have like tons of people that are trying to solve that problem, like in my case, like there's a lot of people that are just much, much smarter than me and more qualified, and like I'm not going to come up with some sort of crazy insight. What you want to do is you want to look to areas where no one else is looking for a variety of reasons. And because we are in this period where mainstream, strictly reductionist, materialistic science has really asserted itself as the only thing that is and was and ever could be, they've kind of opened up these new possibilities in technology and therefore in business, where because most technology development has been based to some extent on this materialist model, they've kind of ignored a lot of things. They've closed themselves down to new effects ever being possible. And so there's these solutions to these major problems in industry, problems that really impact us, that that could be found if anyone was looking in the right directions, but in the right locations, but they're not, because they just the textbooks say it's not there. So I'll give you an example. And this is one of the projects that me and my boys here are working on. So in the 90s, MIT made this big announcement, and they said that we've solved the pollution problem with, like, for example, internal combustion engines. And we've solved it because we've found that plasma, right? So, like electricity arcs to your finger, or lightning, right? That's plasma, sort of electrified gas. Plasma has the ability to sort of deconstruct molecules, kind of like vaporize them. And so all we need to do is create a plasma fuel filter, or like exhaust filter, and we can eliminate the harmful constituents that are the result of, for example, burning fossil fuels. So they spent, I think, like 5 years and millions of dollars, and all the best minds were on it. And they eventually had to abandon the project because they couldn't make the plasma reformer. They couldn't keep it stable. They couldn't keep the plasma stable, and so it wasn't a viable possibility. So they sort of gave it up. One of our guys was a professional drift car racer, and he got involved with he was became the driver of a group that was doing tornado chasing. And he had this moment where this one time he got basically stuck in this huge tornado, and he thought he was going to die, but he witnessed this vortex motion of the tornado, like this spiral motion, and he kind of had this inspirational moment where he's like, I see now that there are like these resonant or vortex forces in nature that are really powerful, and they can kind of hold themselves together. So he's kind of transformed by this. So his sort of background in cars and this experience with this vortex tornado, he kind of put the two together, and he was like, that's it. Like, that's how we can create the stability necessary to hold the plasma together enough to filter the engine. And so after a couple of years of R&D, we've really solved the problem, basically by modeling nature, trying to create a sort of like tornado of plasma inside this container. We were able to keep the plasma stable enough so that we can clean the exhaust that's coming out of an engine to levels that are very, very good, beyond anything that the industry can do. So it's very, very exciting. So that's one example of how it's exciting and fun, and to sort of build companies or projects based on these areas of science that are poorly understood or overlooked. And so that's the common thread between.
Which company is that one? And when will we see that technology? That's some pretty next level stuff, man.
Yeah, that's Thrival Tech.
Which one is it? Thrival Tech?
It's called Thrival Tech, yeah.
Wow, cool. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I'm excited about it. There's a big TV show that's coming out about it soon, and they'll kind of focuses on telling the story and discussing the possibilities. So look for that. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, so Bionatis the name means to harness nature. So what we're doing is we're looking to like forces or principles in nature, things like geometry and resonance, and that can help guide have helped guide a lot of the development of our technologies. Entangled, I guess, because we're looking more at the fabric of consciousness and physical reality and their connection. With Thrival, it's more sort of geometries and spatial relationships and that kind of thing. So you didn't try the patches. Another one that we're working on is it's basically like an energy medicine patch. There's kind of this problem in a lot of energy medicine where you go to an energy medicine practitioner, and like if it's a traditional Chinese medicine guy, then he can do the acupuncture, or he can provide the various like minerals or whatever that you need to feel better, and it does work. Like it definitely works. The problem is it's not scalable, right? So it's expensive to go. You might have to go a couple of times for them to diagnose and effectively treat the problem. And it's not one size fits all, right? So it might be a problem today, but the problem changes tomorrow. So getting it scalable and affordable and all that has been the challenge. And I think that's the problem that we've kind of solved here. So what we've been able to do is basically to take hundreds of constituent ingredients like anti-inflammatories, pain-relieving substances, a panoply of other things, and essentially take their energetic fingerprint or their molecular fingerprint and transfer that into a capacitive patch, which can be worn on the body. And we find that the benefits of the pain-relieving or anti-inflammatory substances are in turn transferred to the body when the patch is worn. And here's why, or here's why we think it works. You know how like nothing ever really touches, right? So it seems as though my hand is touching my other hand, but if you were to zoom in, you'd see the electrons on the outer part of my skin coming very close, but not actually touching the electrons of my skin. Well, that's kind of what's going on when you swallow an aspirin, right? So you swallow the aspirin, and the outer electrons of the aspirin molecule coming in contact with the body. You have this sort of lock and key mechanism or model that we have for how aspirin action works, but still nothing's ever really touching. So our thinking was, it's possible that the electrons are actually not just dumb, dull electrons, but they actually carry information. So in our words, they're boundary conditions on the Planck field. But really what that means is that the electrons off of an aspirin may actually contain aspirin information, if you will. And so the electrons off of something like arsenic might be arsenic information. And so can you take the electrons or that information off of the substances, the drugs, the natural substances, whatever that you want, and deliver that to the body? Because if you could, then you can have topical benefits of things that normally you have to swallow, and you probably wouldn't have the risk of overdose or side effects or any contraindications that you do when you're swallowing the chemical sledgehammer that is the pharmaceutical paradigm, right? And so we chose this Mylar patch, which Mylar is the same material that goes into capacitors, electric capacitors, and so it's designed to store electrons. That's its job. But it comes in different forms, right? From this plastic patch to you can actually have like fabric of woven Mylar, which is what we use. So we have a very interesting system that essentially takes the electrons from the constituent ingredients, the benefits that we want, and charges those into the Mylar patch. So then when you wear it, our first product is focused on, it's for pain relief. So when you wear it, you can feel it almost immediately when you put it on. There's this like sort of relaxing anti-inflammatory sensation that's remarkable. It's extremely effective at stopping inflammation, which is what chronic pain is basically. So for example, we took this to a pain clinic and we had their physicians do thermal imaging. And thermal imaging is a really quick way of showing that when you put like the Predator camera, that movie, like the thermal camera on somebody, if they've got upper back pain, it's like really hot. And so it shows up pretty clearly. So if you swallow an aspirin, then, another 45 minutes or something, you might see a degree or two of heat reduction, which corresponds to the pain going down. With these patches, within, I say, a minute to 10, 15 minutes, when the person is wearing them, you see like a significant reduction in inflammation as measured by the thermal, to the point where the doctors like couldn't believe it. And this was true in 100% of the humans studied in that trial, right? So we've been working on this for a couple of years, and it's really it's been available for about a year, but we're really about to launch it soon. One of the things we have an athlete focused patch coming out. One of the things that's been very interesting is that in a matter of months has exploded like virally among many of the world's top athletes. I wish I could. Eventually, we'll indicate who they are. But I'll put it this way: if you're watching ESPN or you're watching whatever TV show, chances are you're going to see these guys wearing these patches, and they're not bandages. It's actually energy medicine that's helping them recover, not just after the workout or after the game, but during the workout. So they're not as sore, they heal faster, and they're ready. They're good to go for the next game by wearing these. It's the feedback has been amazing. That's not our marketing. That's like it's just spreading. So I wear them. One of the reasons why I feel like I can work so long, like I put in easy 12-hour days, is I wear Luminas patches on my shoulders, like right here. And I find that it just keeps me relaxed and keeps my posture correct. And I just like feel good when I'm wearing them all day. And it's been enormously helpful. It's part of my like daily work routine. Yeah. So you've got, send me your address and I'll send you some.
Yes, good. Well, I'm always interested in peak performance, and I know about inflammation. I don't know who told me this, but they basically said that, the root of all disease is inflammation. And also with recovery, it's inflammation. So this is what the patch is doing. And when you go to the website, the athletic one is staminapro.com for people who want to check it out, and also Luminas. .com, Luminas.com. You have this Star Trek image of all of these things being like coming down and then just getting absorbed in the patch. And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. One way that my mind is seeing it is like a multivitamin in a different absorption mechanism. And then the second thing that I'm thinking, and I'm just curious here, what other possibilities are there? Because I'm normally very, very healthy. And what I'm looking for, what I want to do is have more energy. I want to have more peace of mind, more clarity, more focus. Could you potentially take these ingredients that you're putting in and make a different batch for a different outcome in the future? Once you
Absolutely.
have this technology? Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're focusing on pain relief and inflammation reduction because it's a huge problem. It's like we're young people, but the number of humans in the world that are suffering from pain is enormous, and it's a daily thing. And as we learn more about the long-term effects of taking NSAIDs or other chemical anti-inflammatories, I think that people are going to be looking for supplementary alternatives or additional treatment paradigms altogether. And this has really made a big difference among the people that we've given it to, among our early customers. But it's only the beginning, right? So there's all kinds of other things that you can do based on this technology platform beyond just inflammation reduction, which is one of the reasons why it's exciting. We've been working on a formula that, we've been working on a lot of formulas, and we're looking forward to coming out with new things. I'm not involved in that process. just kind of more of helping supplementary capacity right now. But I do get to test a lot of the new stuff, and it's pretty cool. Some of the benefits of the toys you get to play with when you're working in mad science.
Yeah, definitely, man. I wish I was just, in your neighborhood. You kind of remind me of a good friend of mine that I had in Whistler. His name's Adam Poole, and he's a tech genius. So whenever you were near him, your computer would be always maxed out, upgraded with the new software, all that kind of stuff. And if he were traveling, then basically you'd be left to where it was when he left. So, it seems like you're really on the forefront of some really interesting technologies, some really interesting breakthroughs. When we're talking here and I'm looking at the websites and some of the stuff you're looking at, and I think it was in Time, I don't know if it's Time Magazine or one of those big ones, but it was talking about cyborgs and, technology. They're putting things in lenses. And so it looks like really the sky is the limit as far as technology and biology, technology and human interaction. From your view and what you're looking at, how do you see that playing out? Do you see it as a benefit? Some people are freaking out because of the cyborg thing. I think, like anything, if used responsibly, we're using new technologies to really increase the quality of life, also enhance human performance. So I've seen some interesting things in as far as augmented reality goes and the information that we can perceive, to upgrade, to make ourselves safer, to improve our performance for whatever the case is. But where do you see us going 5, 10 years down the road, or what would be the ideal situation for you with this merge and expansion of consciousness and technology, and using them, benevolently? Because the mission statement at Bionatus is really fantastic. And even if we just look at that alone, I'm just going to read it real quick because I think it's really beautiful. And that's why I knew I loved Peter, because I met him in Egypt and he gave me his card and I researched it. And then just right on the website, I read the mission statement and it's so wonderful. But it says, Bionatus focuses on developing breakthrough scientific discoveries into successful end stage businesses with significant global impact. Occupying a unique role as both the founders and co-executives of our companies, we provide strategic and business development oversight while maintaining guiding principles that are focused above and beyond just financial return, rooted in delivering technologies that benefit humanity and the environment. And that's it. If you can kind of build your business from just that core principle of benefiting others, but also being environmentally conscious, you can't really go wrong. And if you do it at a massive scale, that's even better. So I kind of ranted there. I don't know if I formulated a question,
Sure.
but I'm wondering if you can just either speak on that or really just anything you'd recommend to a young tech person out there, because I can't really speak to those guys. There's a lot of young, really brilliant minds out there, and you're doing really awesome work with a lot of integrity. So, there's a lot of young guys out there that could probably make massive breakthroughs as well if they can steer their intention and their genius in the right direction.
Yeah, and to the extent that I can speak to those people, the world is changing very quickly, and it's the possibilities that of new paradigm science coming into the world, of really remarkable new technologies, of new ways of doing things. I'm on the inside, and I can tell you that this stuff is happening, right? It's the things that you were imagining as science fiction are starting to come true, and although it's not really out in the public yet, the positioning has started to happen among those who are in the know, because we're entering a very new world, and fortunately, it's going to be, I think, more decentralized than we ever expected, which is great. And that means that there's a lot of opportunity for young people or old people or anyone that knew that there was more out there, either technologically or scientifically or whatever it is in the world, to get involved and be a part and to articulate your vision of the future. That's just not a nice thing to say. I actually mean it, and we're actually doing it. And we're not the only ones who are actually doing it. And for us to take a stand, I guess, and say, look, there are very beneficial things about the way that reality works that have been overlooked that we can take advantage of, and we can lead the way, has made all the difference for us because people care. When you're doing something that is interesting and that can benefit others, and people care, and they'll listen to you, and they'll invest with you, and they'll take your product in ways that just really aren't possible with something that's just kind of boring, or that doesn't have soul, or it doesn't impact. It's not an impact kind of operation, right? So don't be afraid to get a little unusual. Let's put it that way, and to say things, and to sort of say what you really think, because y'all are going to be like the leaders. Those who do are going to be the leaders in the like the sort of cultural influencers in the years to come. So then you asked also about about biology and technology merging, or consciousness and technology merging, and that's I think Entangled is an important part of that conversation, and it will become a more important part of that conversation. There's a lot to say about that. I think it boils down to whether or not we end up living in like a human civilization or an inhuman civilization, and that depends very much on the choices that we're going to be making right now. If you watch science fiction movies, you get this idea from virtually all of them that there's this inevitable dystopic future that lays for us at the end of sophisticated technology. I don't want to think that that fate is already decided. Like, if you have some sort of crazy AI that takes over and decides that humans are bad and tries to kill us, or whatever version of this stuff it is, or that we upload our minds into machines and we just lose all sense of what is familiar to us about being human. I don't. The future is consistently surprising, and technology itself is consistently surprising. So we may end up in a world that is not at all what we expected, and that's the only thing that's consistent about the future and technology. But I would hope that, like, when it comes to making this decision about what future we're going to live in, properly understanding consciousness, I think, is a very critical and understated part of what that choice is going to be. For example, if you let the thinking about consciousness lead your decisions, and that thinking is that consciousness is an illusion, that it's not real, that if you have a sophisticated enough collection of computer chips and calculating ability and software that you can somehow end up with an AI, then first of all, your worries are going to be misplaced, and you're not actually going to make breakthroughs, but you're going to be subconsciously or not kind of developing this future that is a very disconnected kind of future. However, if you can actually learn something from consciousness research, you learn that consciousness is not really, it's a lot more complicated and difficult, and probably further away from understanding than we're getting from popular science magazines and from the future. And I think it's more interesting and more complicated and more difficult in the ways that preserve what it means to be human, the qualities that I think most of us don't want to see go away. I think I don't know exactly what those are, but I think a lot of it has to do with the extent to which our experience or our consciousness is a part of something that loops us all in, that connects us all. And that has a dignity that should be preserved, right? And that each human's expression of that has a dignity that should be preserved and not given up. Consciousness research, to me, points very clearly to that fact. I would hope that we can develop more of a symbiotic relationship with the future technologies that are coming down the line. Let's say a non-symbiotic one. I mean, this is kind of a subjective opinion, but implanting chips in our brains or whatever, not so symbiotic to me. But maybe a technology that uses the way that a consciousness collapses a wave function to deliver to it certain experiences or content, or interacts with the built environment in new ways. I think that's more symbiotic and that's non-invasive, and it's not necessarily taking away from the kinds of things that I personally would want to preserve about being human. Yeah. Okay.
Man, well, it's interesting that you use the word loop, because a lot of my research has been into, consciousness as far as, expanding my consciousness through meditation or Zen or lucid dreaming, astral projection, things like that. How can I manipulate my own consciousness with my own consciousness, with my own breathing, with my own, with making the body do different things, Wim Hof breathing, being in China with monks doing these weird things. And when you're talking about the loop, what I've learned through mass manipulation in media is that, whatever we are presented with, we need to make sense of it. So if I say to the audience, don't imagine a pink elephant, or try not to imagine a yellow hippopotamus, for you to make sense of what I'm saying, your mind has to bring up that image to figure out what the heck I'm talking about. And so when I see media, and a really excellent documentary I recommend people checking out is Edward Bernays' Century of the Self. And he was Sigmund Freud's nephew and was responsible for, basically the mass manipulation and what we're into today, with just how we can manipulate the masses through fear and propaganda. And so when our consciousness loop in media and television, and like you say on TV, it's all dystopic and what can go wrong and war and more and more, we just keep running this loop of what that possibility is. And my perception and belief is that as we are all just watching this, our minds and our consciousness is trying to make sense of what we're viewing on the screen. And as it does that, it's sending a signal out to all beings on the planet, like a frequency. So we're basically plugging in our consciousness like a projector and then flinging it out to the mass consciousness, to the field. And, basically the research is showing is like we are having an effect on ourselves and everybody. So one of the shifts I would love see really quickly would be a shift in media, really painting the possibilities of what if it goes right? What is the most ideal future? Consistent movies and TV and media about, maybe they like to say like, oh, that doesn't sell, but I don't know if that's true. Like there's storyline, sure. And sure, some movies should be whatever tragic, but unless somebody can imagine the idea first, then that puts it out into the field. I kind of wrote about this on my Instagram today about what is possible versus impossible. And, for a while, everybody was like, flight is impossible. Well, the Wright brothers didn't think so. Michelangelo didn't think so. Or was it Michelangelo or Leonardo? Which, can't remember. Remember?
Da Vinci.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big miss. 0 for 2. And it was the last Burning Man too. Yeah, but he is working on flight back then because his mind can imagine it. And if he could have spread that idea on a mass scale to everybody in the world at that one time, and then whatever percentage could be like, you know what, maybe we can do this. We're now opening the doors to those possibilities. But as we continually get perpetuated with the doors or the possibilities of technology ruining the world, and another country ruining the world, and another religion ruining the world, and your neighbor ruining your world, for you to figure it out, both it's affecting you and the mass consciousness. So I think that your research is going to prove that, and we need to be, from my view, very careful with what we're perpetuating. And a very, very fast way to shift your own consciousness is to shut that off instantly. Shut off all the negative news feeds and things like that. And if you still want to get your information, sure, but limit it, because if you keep diving down that rabbit hole, you're going to get more and more and more of it. So I think it's the fastest way to increase your own quality of reality. And I'm not sure if your research or thoughts kind of mirror that.
Totally. I really like the phrase quality of reality, because that's kind of what it is, right? I mean, if you can watch mainstream news all day and your mood starts to change, and you just get kind of poisoned with a lot of this like crisis mode and negativity that their particular agenda is trying to push upon you. And it's easy to get wrapped up in. And so, yeah, do a little check, do a scan of your the quality of your reality, and you can you're a conscious person, right? So you can start to bring things in that change. It really does start to make a difference. It really does. There's a concept in self-improvement circles that says you're the average of the 5 people around whom you spend most of your time. Rather true, for a lot of different reasons, right? When it comes to the kind of like, let's just call it like the more metaphysical mind-matter interaction stuff, it's possible that the type of effect that we're seeing with the random number generators and the intention is some part of the chain of how our thoughts can affect things in some small way that bring somebody or something into our macroscopic world. That's quite possible. We don't know the full mechanism yet, but I think that there's something to it. And if so, that means that there's like our thoughts definitely have some real power in the world, and not just the world of the quantum, but it may indeed have some sort of macroscopic effect. We're seeing more and more that there are quantum effects in biology. Well, if there's quantum effects in biology, then can there be mind-matter interaction effects and probabilistic stuff inside the brains of someone else, right? Are we looking at the opening of other types of communication and human-to-human interaction that we're just starting to explore? It's possible. It's possible. Certainly not in the minority thinking so. One of my favorite stories is it's related to what you're talking about as far as like being around people or situations that are going to influence your decision to think something is possible or impossible. So in the 1850s, 1860s, the group of abolitionists in the United States were going around and saying we need to end slavery because slavery is wrong, right? And not too many people disagreed with them on the premise that slavery is wrong. That like owning humans and putting them to work and so forth, like humans as property, was an idea that was widely uncomfortable. The pushback that the abolitionists received was more like this: if the slaves are freed, who's going to pick the cotton? Right? So if you were from the future and you went back, or let's just say that you're an abolitionist and you said, I've seen the future and we don't need slaves to pick the cotton because in another few decades, there's going to be these machines. And these machines are going to have these like mechanical arms, and they're going to be powered by this stuff made of like compressed fossilized Jurassic plants and vegetations and dinosaur bones or whatever. And then we're going to extract it and we're going to refine it and ship it over here. And we're going to like create this device that sprays this stuff into a cylinder, and then it's going to explode in just the right way. And it's going to create all this like motion in the machine, and the machine is going to pick the cotton. And so therefore, we can get rid of that. They'd look at you and they'd go, you're absolutely insane, right? But of course, no one would say that because no one could possibly predict those things. But the point is that like the future can sometimes surprise you, and being around people that have their like moral compass or their compass kind of pointed in the right direction, like in a positive future, can make all the difference versus people that are going to find various reasons why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, or just basically to sort of influence you one way or the other, operating on like what they think is the best information available, but it really isn't the best message. And of course, the moral argument there won out, right? That slavery is wrong, and we sort of systematically dismantled with that institution as we know it. And there was a bit of, I think that there was a bit of faith that we'll find a way to pick the cotton. And it took different forms, but it got done, right? So so sort of being around people who have their compass like straight can help you make the right decisions, and if done in faithfulness, then things will work out, I think.
I like that, man. Yeah, no, I think I like just the word the compass, and just to speak on that example, if you let go of the old paradigm, the more people working on the new paradigm, the faster it's going to come. And people working together can create any reality. It's just a decision that we make. The solution will be made. But if you don't look and put energy and thought and effort toward the new solution, it can't happen. Well, it might happen naturally. It happens slowly through evolution or whatever. You could even go backwards in time if they're just, two heads, hitting each other. But, we may as well go hand in harmony. It just seems to make sense. One of the questions, I know we got to wrap up here because you're at work and you've given me some of your precious time as you're making these technologies that are going to change the world. Who even knows what you're working on? I would love to be a fly on the wall as I see some of these new technologies and breakthroughs happen. But one thing I wanted to ask is, and you've touched on it a little bit, but what is consciousness to you? Like, what is important for people to understand about consciousness to empower them? And if you could give one belief or perspective or change on the planet that everybody would just adopt, and it would just be adopted on the planet, what would you give? What would you switch or change or offer?
So the definition of consciousness is like sort of famously difficult, and that word means different things to different people, but coming more from like the let's objectify it and study it point of view, consciousness it's your awareness, right? So it's your self-awareness. It's the fact that you are aware at all. Trying to explain why a 4 pounds of wet brain could become aware of itself and contemplate itself is a good way of thinking about the mystery of consciousness. It's like you have to use consciousness to understand to think about what consciousness is, and that thinking about what consciousness is, that witnessing your mind thinking about it in definitions, that is your awareness. And all people have it, right? So it's not something that you have to earn through being enlightened or whatever. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something that is innate to yourself, perhaps as close to you as anything that could be, right? So it's your memories, your feelings, your experiences, your day-to-day kind of witnessing. Simultaneously, it's the most mysterious thing that we've ever encountered, which is kind of fun to think about. I personally think that consciousness is not confined to just people, but the domain of consciousness is like more or less everything. So certainly all biological life. There's people who would make arguments that there's degrees of consciousness, right? From less complicated organisms onto humans and beyond. Maybe. But the point is that you've got it. And it's more than just, in my opinion, I think, more than just an illusion of the brain, that it is a thing that in some way it does connect you to all people who share that thing of being conscious. And I think so because it must interact somehow with the fabric of physical reality. That's not going to be a surprise to a lot of people who don't come from this let's objectify it and study it point of view. But I think that if there was one shift in somebody's life surrounding the consciousness question that I would recommend, it would be to start paying attention to coincidences, to synchronicities. I think that if it's true that our mind is sort of influencing somehow our environment, the things and the people around us, and that our subconscious mind is much, much smarter than our conscious mind, then there are these little meaningful coincidences that will enter into your day, right? And very often these things there can be real gems on the other side of following them. And I know for myself, it's made all the difference, noticing the coincidences, following the coincidences, and then trying to unpack what coincidence and synchronicity is from the point of view of like a consciousness researcher. It's been really rewarding. So yeah, I think that we all have something in our lives that we want to overcome, or we want to achieve, or we want to get from A to B, and you don't know how to get there. And that's okay, because we have this great intelligence inside of us, this consciousness that I think acts kind of like, it's almost like the whole universe is it's like a sorting mechanism in some ways. And you can be taken to, you can go through some very unlikely paths to sort of get to the other side of what you want. And I get to talk to a lot of people about, I get to have a lot of deep conversations with a lot of interesting people and a lot of successful people. And this is the one thing that is very common among all of them, is that there are these synchronicities or interesting things that happen around some of the most meaningful events in their life. And follow the clues and pay attention to the clues and the synchronicities, because it can send you on an interesting journey. That's what I'd say.
Awesome, brother. I love it, man. That's really cool. This has been a very fascinating hour and a half. I would love to chat with you all day, every day. But I know you got a lot of work to do. You're a busy man. So first of all, I just want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your effort and your dedication. I think that we're both consciousness explorers, and you're doing it in a polar opposite way than my brain naturally understands, and coming into your world. So it's great to learn from the research that you're doing and putting out, so then I can bring it into my field, learn about it, and upgrade my own life. So thank you from a personal note.
Of course.
And so I just wanted to ask if there's anything that you wanted to leave the listeners with, or if there's anything that you wish that I had asked and you want to kind of talk about before we end off. The floor is yours. Thank you, brother.
So you're a Zen athlete, right? I think your website says that, which is a cool.
My website says it, then it must be true.
Yeah. I have, I work a lot, and I have a couple of secret weapons for maintaining the energy and the focus to do so. One is wearing these patches, like the Luminas patches up here, which just eliminates the fatigue for me. But I've been playing with something else for about a year, which has been pretty powerful. And if some of you guys are athletes that are listening, you might find this interesting too. So it's a molecule that I've been eating for the past 18 months. The story goes that a couple of years ago, there was a university in Paris, and they were tasked to study the toxicity of a nanoparticle that was going to be finding its way into industrial applications. And they wanted to make sure that it, wasn't harmful. So the researchers took these rats and mice, and lifespan, I think in this case it was mice, lifespan of laboratory mice are very well known. And they fed this molecule to the mice, and they didn't get sick, but they ended up living beyond their lifespan, and then 2 times their normal life. And somewhere after they crossed the mark of living, I think it was twice their lifespan, they had to kill them and end the study. There was another group that repeated the same results with rats, and found that the rats fed this molecule are living, twice their age or more. And on looking at their organs and everything, they're really clean. They don't look as though they've aged as much. Fascinating stuff. So my buddy told me about this research, and I remember hearing about it and then forgetting about it. So a so 18 months ago, I was introduced to a guy who was actually starting to make this stuff because he had given it to his mom, his 90-year-old mom. And she was losing her eyesight and she was starting to get dementia. And so she took this, I think, for like a couple of months, and her mind fog cleared up and her eyesight went back to normal, and she got rid of the glasses, and I think she like walked back into the DMV and got her license back. There was another gentleman who I ended up meeting actually, who had a stroke, and his symptoms were largely erased after, I don't know, 6 months of taking the stuff. Very interesting. So I was like, sure, I'll just try eating it. So I've been eating it for 18 months, and I felt that I definitely have a lot more energy. So a lot more, like, I guess you would call it like aerobic energy. I know that there are a number of athletes who were either college athletes or semi-pro athletes, some pro athletes who were kind of like low in their game. They weren't top ranking, and after they were taking these things, they just like went and became like sort of dominant people in their field. And the molecule is called carbon 60, or C60 for short. And what it is it's a 60-sided carbon molecule that is is an extremely effective antioxidant. And oxidative stress, meaning the impact to our bodies of free radicals, is complicit in like most of your diseases, most of your illnesses. Your body has this sensitive system to eliminate the free radicals, but if the free radicals overcome your body's ability to eliminate them, then you have the degradation of your cells, and your telomeres, which control your aging, basically your age, and then ultimately your lifespan, are shortened or affected such that when the cells divide, they get shorter and shorter. So the antioxidant, the thinking is, the C60, is that it eliminates most of the effects of oxidative stress on the body, meaning your performance as an athlete is improved. Many of the illnesses that you may have can be aided by your body not being attacked by these antioxidants, so that your body's own like intelligent healing system can heal itself. And that's definitely kind of like what I've felt in taking it. So for athletes or performance-based individuals interested in upping their game and trying something very new, I'm not recommending it necessarily, just saying that I've been taking it and it's been pretty profound. I don't think there's any like FDA studies or anything like that on it. Then you might check out carbon 60. It's been helping a lot of people. And I think you're probably going to see an explosion of interest in this stuff in the coming years.
Dude, as soon as you started talking about it, I knew exactly what you were talking about, because I just had my friend, I don't know if you've know who he is. His name's Dr. Hari Khalsa, and he's such a fun guy, and is all about just what is the leading forefront of medicine. And he, only 2 days ago, this has come into my consciousness. Only 2 days ago.
Wow.
So now, yeah, I wish it was 18 months ago. So I tried to order some the other day and they were sold out. So now this is like what we're talking about, coincidence. So I am definitely getting my butt some C60 to give it a shot. Definitely want to try the patches. And I've heard a lot about CBD as well. It seems like to be, that's one of the ones that I just want to try personally, because I guess we have the most receptors in the body, and everybody who, I know people personally have cured themselves of cancer. So if, let's say it's like something like vitamin C or something that the body can really use to improve, and you just give it little bits, then who knows what the upgrade is going to be. So I'm super stoked that you got that out, because that is really important. And I've only had 2 days to look into it, but I've watched a couple podcasts that Hari had sent me, and the one guy's a NASA researcher, and that's the guy you're speaking about. And his mom had dementia, and like that's pretty intense,
Yeah,
so.
I was one of his early guinea pigs. And yeah, it's cool. I know that like this stuff, C60 is really hard to get a hold of because the manufacturing process is just very timely and expensive. Then on top of that, you don't want to eat, you don't want to consume carbon 60 that's been only made for industrial purposes, meaning like it's got potentially solvents in there that you don't want to eat. So the purity, I think, is going to become an important factor. I know that the gentleman we're speaking about gets it from, he's kind of neurotically pure in his sourcing. But you might, well, there's a couple of different places where you can get it online, but look for where I get it is Live Longer Labs. But I know there's a couple of different places, but if you search Live Longer Labs, you can find it. That's really interesting that you just heard about that. I'm convinced that this is going to be a very big thing. And if you can stop oxidative stress, if you can limit the shortening of the telomeres, all of a huge amount of modern medicine or physiological knowledge would tell you that you can live 100, 200, 300 plus years, and that would be normal. It's kind of, as far as we can tell, it's oxidative stress and your telomere shortening. That's what you call aging, right? You stop that, and then death starts to look more like a disease that should be cured than this kind of inevitable thing that we all face that always comes too soon, right?
Yep. Yeah,
It's an
brother.
example of how the future might be very different than what we imagine, and might be actually quite nigh as well. There's also this idea that the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. Somebody said that, and I think it was a really brilliant quote. So yeah, I mean, for those of us that have our ears to the internets, right, and are willing to experiment on ourselves a little bit in a cautious way, the future might be here for us, right? It's unevenly distributed in our advantage. But if that's speaking to you, then check it out. So I don't really get a lot of exercise, but so I'm not like measuring my performance or anything. But for you, since you do that kind of stuff, I think how it affects you would be more obvious, and we could get a little bit more like more than just like anecdotal atom talk, right? There could be like some more like you have more experience on which to draw with a baseline condition than me.
It's like the most scientific.
So why don't you take it for 3 months or 6 months, and then I'll start a YouTube channel and I'll interview you about your experience with carbon 60.
Sounds good, man. I like it.
Cool.
Man, brother, I'm so glad you dropped that last nugget. That's super important. If I had not heard about it just 2 days ago, I would just be going super deep on it, because I think it is some really fascinating new information, and there are breakthroughs happening all the time if we're open. And the thing is, that what did they say, like the revolution will not be televised, all that kind of stuff. For me, when I'm looking at new information and willing to experiment on myself in consciousness realms, plant medicine, putting something into my body, my body's sacred, and I'm like, okay, I want my own consciousness to be able to do it. And science and technology is catching up, and if I can look at it and do due diligence and see the human being and then the story and how it was birthed, well, if it's like a benevolent story, if it just all seems to add up, then I'm willing to check it out. And especially if someone that I know is doing it, maybe I'll let a buddy go try first. But it's kind of like the athlete in me too. When you're kids, the first one to jump off or the first one to try it in snowboarding, one of us takes the leap. But if we can add up enough ducks in a row for it to make sense for us. And I think a lot of these breakthroughs come through trauma, and they come through suffering, and they come through medicine, right? And this one came from, wanting to heal his mother. And so when you look at stories like that, and you just roll it around in your heart for a little bit, just feel into it, some of them will make more sense to you than others. And so, I just advise people to look for their alternative medicines, and they are, starting with natural healing first, and then, moving outwards, not just band-aiding the problem, but fascinating stuff. Man, thank you so much. You want to add something? Go for it.
Oh, well, what I was talking about earlier about following the clues and synchronicities. Like sometimes if you hear about something twice or more in a short time span, that's kind of like a clue or a synchronicity to follow. So for you, maybe that's like another data point for you to consider like trying it.
Oh yeah, I was all in with Hari, man. That guy was so gung ho. He's so great. We've been chatting since the podcast. I met him in California, and he's such a great character. And I'll show you his website. The stuff that he's into as far as healing, he's got a Rife machine. He's got all kinds of stuff, man. And to me, it looks all legit, all square. And a lot of the technologies, although they're, let's say, futuristic and creating miracles that can be measured, they're not that expensive, for health. And what I have seen, what I felt intuitively since a very young age, is that I was immortal. Now, maybe that meant spiritually, and that's what I felt. But I also felt like I wasn't afraid of being 100. Again, could have been youth because I'm young and, ignorant and don't know I'm about to die. But the older I get in this path of really researching consciousness and reality, and this pursuit, immortality keeps coming up. And in the Bible, they live to 800 or 900 years. And I think that if we stop poisoning ourselves with crap, and we look at modern technology in a benevolent way, and we take care of our bodies, and we most importantly master our consciousness with what is possible, that's going to be the leap. We can really make these huge leaps in consciousness and begin to affect our bodies through central nervous system. And people like Wim Hof are already doing these things. People are doing miraculous things, and this can be taught. And so, I am all for that. We should be living healthy well into, 1 in 200. And I think that we very may well see that, or walk into it anyway.
Yeah. I would be surprised if we didn't see it in our lifetimes, that our lifespans double. And not just as a result of better intercessory surgery and medicine, but really more on the lifestyle side, right? So on longevity, as opposed to helping you overcome what would normally be a mortal illness when it happens.
Quality longevity as well.
Of course, nobody wants to live 200 years in pain, right? So you want to actually have a higher quality of life. And I think the approaches that are going to be successful are the approaches that are going to work by mechanism, like through means that as a result, your quality of life is also increased. So for example, if it's carbon 60, if you're helping the body live longer by reducing the oxidative stress and resisting telomere shortening, you're also going to feel good. Your organs are going to be younger, and you're going to just like have more resources internally available to you. And so that tells me that that's probably one of the C60 as a technology is probably like one of these technologies that is going to be part of a longevity regime, because it does contribute to the quality of life as well as the extension of life.
Amazing. Yep. I feel it too, man. And I'm definitely going to try it out. Well, my friend, it has been an honor, a privilege. It's been fascinating. So before we go, do you have any last nuggets you want to share with us? Any other secret gems? I bet you that there's a vault in that brain of yours with probably 1,000, but you can only share like a little nugget of. But anything that you want to leave the listeners with, or any nuggets you want to dive deep into, I'm still here, man.
Oh God, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Probably just means I don't get out enough.
You're welcome back anytime.
So we did consciousness and global consciousness and plasma and energy medicine and C60 and technology in the future. I think that's probably enough. But maybe 90 minutes of me prattling on is sufficient.
Yeah, brother. Well, as more stuff comes down the pipe, you're always welcome back on the show, man. And thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your work. Thank you for walking the path of integrity and intention. And for me, that's all that's required in this, new planet and new way we're going. Everybody just be full of integrity and set your intention, to serve others as well. Make sure you can swim and do your thing, but serve others. And I definitely see that in you, loud and clear. And I'm grateful for you, brother. So thank you. Where can people find more about your work and what you're up to if they want to follow?
Sure. Well, they can follow the Entangled project. We have a mobile app that's almost done. I know I've been saying that forever, but it is actually almost done. You can go to entangled.org or just search consciousness app in Google, and it's the first few pages of things that come up. There's a waiting list for you to get on and get the app when it's available. And I think there's something like 11,000 people waiting for it right now. And we're going to start chunking that up and inviting people. We're sort of in the beta test phase, the public beta now. But you'll get there eventually, I promise. And Luminas, the patches, luminas.com. Just search Luminas. And Carbon 60, C60. All of these internet searches will get you there. And thanks very much. This has been fun.
My pleasure, brother. My pleasure. Well, have a great day, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening. Catch you in the next episode. Peace.